presentation, catching up on various one question I have, and this is very much related, and I want to forward how you are looking at it, I'm sure. So I'm sure you know about the case of Baldev Singh which happened, and which was very much commented upon, and a lot is written about it, and a lot of criticism happened. Then, and we know that what happened was they used the special analysis agreements for a compromise in that case, and the important part is the one-page judgment. They never talk, one paragraph, the 71 paragraph, but they never talk about why compromise happened, and so much is written. Then again, there was this case which followed it up. It was the case of Shimbu versus State of Haryana in 2015, where the court fortunately said this, that justice, maybe whatever he's done is on facts, because there is a small term in the case of Baldev Singh that this is on facts, and so in Shimbu, the Supreme Court said that Baldev Singh was a case which was on facts of the circumstances. We cannot have compromise in that case. Forget about that. And it was useful. But now then what happened, and that's why when my question comes, just very recently there is a case which is Ravindra versus State of Madhya Pradesh, which comes in 2015, 26th February, 2015. So now what happened in Ravindra's case is that the Supreme Court is a gang rape case again, and the Supreme Court talks about everything, and then finally it comes to this point that there is a compromise which is happening in the party, between the parties. The court almost in the same language of Baldev Singh, that this is a compromise happened not amongst each other, and all of them are married and so on. We allowed, and they again evoked special and adequate reasons already undergone, and surprisingly they just cited Baldev Singh case and endorsed that, without citing, obviously, Shimbu's case. So, now, what was surprising to me, and which is what I find questions is that how do we deal with this cherry picking in the sentencing? And court is not behaving as an institution at all. So you have something which is not being followed up. Some court is saying that it is not a case which is precedent. And then again another court takes up and takes a complete new thing. Of course, Ravindra's case is even more problematic because now, 2015, when we have taken away special and adequate reasons, one might expect that they might at least discuss that the legislation failed. Nothing according to that. So as if like we do not have to enter it anymore. So like my conceptual point was that how do we deal with this cherry picking, and how do we deal with this court not working as an institution, where you can have anything and you can work out that. Beyond the more conceptual question, then how do we deal with the larger issue of compromising things which you cannot compromise, and you don't deal with the issue of why this is happening, because that's the problem with Baldev Singh. It does not go into the why of it, and that's the problem with Ravindra's case. Never going into the why of it. And very relevant to you just asked that, how it's important that evidence should be brought in. They don't go into the why of it, they don't rely on the why.
Discussing the whole disparity, and we are discussing from Indian perspective. Actually, in India, we can see both the things, that is interjurisdictional and intrajurisdictional. And if you are going to intrajurisdictional, you can see that there, in the same court, in the same district, judges are clueless. When I conducted a research on these judges interviewing, they are saying that we know that in the same district, different judges are giving different sentence, but we are relying only on the advocates. Then I interviewed the whole training which these people are getting from the higher judiciary. They are saying literally they are not getting any training. At the same time, we should try to understand, I think one example which was quoted by, I think, Dr. Mohan Gopal, it's relating to, they prepared a mock case and given to the, so, he told me that thing, to decide, out of 100%, 50% people acquitted. 50% judges who are sitting in the higher judiciary, they acquitted, and only the 50% is coming with different types of sentencing. So the issue is relating from the top to the bottom. This sentencing issue is coming very crucial, and one of the most important things is relating to There is no unanimity among aggravating and mitigating circumstances. It is according to the whims and fancies of each person. If they want to acquit, they will acquit. If they want to convict, they will convict. They will find reasons according to their interest. And you quoted one case, Shimbu versus State of Haryana. Brilliant decision. Gogoi is a part of that thing. They are going behind and they are going to the case. How she was brutally raped in a knife point, and in the Supreme Court they are discussing about entering into a compromise between accused and the victim. But you just see that after that, nowhere Shimbu is discussing. So, complicated issues. And one more thing, how the legislature's approach towards sentencing. Veerappa Moily opened the gate by saying that by accepting, okay, we have a lot of issues in sentencing. But after that, nothing happened. So, what is your response? And one more thing, sir, actually relating to, we discussed about the sentencing commission, guidelines, grid system, but I am having my own apprehension relating to importing these systems to. Okay, but if we are not doing research and there how the academic are working relating to sentencing guidelines and the commission is another aspect. So in Indian situation, what we can do is a big problematic question.
On the issue of Baldev Singh and cherry picking, like you said, enough was written to make Justice Kaju blog about it and explain his reasons in Baldev Singh. Similar thing like you were saying in Shimbu, where Supreme Court apparently is faced with a situation where an affidavit is given by the victim saying that I don't want to go on to this anymore, so just get rid of this case, I'm fed up. That also sort of reflects what the victim has gone through the system that you're giving an affidavit saying, please stop this system. Right? And he justifies, those of you have read his blog on this, he justifies the sentence saying, look, there was an affidavit, both parties were agreeable, he had already served out 3.5 years. I asked the council whether compensation, they would give compensation. Council agreed. I asked the prosecutor, there was no counsel for the victim, and he agreed, so therefore we thought this is the best solution. Even though it's illegal, Justice Kaju did feel the need to say that in the judgment. How are we supposed to know all of that has happened behind the scenes? The judgment just says if you are studying that and you want to use it as precedent, it says gang rape, compromise possible, adequate and special reasons, give fine. Now you are talking about Supreme Court, trial courts are using it as precedent day in and day out. They're saying that Baldev Singh, which is saying facts of this, which to be fair to him says facts of this case, and you use it. There's another out of sentencing, is Dilip versus State of 2005, breach of promise to marry case. This is P.V. Reddy. Gave compensation in that particular case because the victim was pregnant, breach of promise to marry, had a child, and said, okay, this is not rape, I am acquitting, but I asked counsel whether, because there's a child and there's no custody issue or maintenance issue, would you be willing to give maintenance? He said, I will deposit a lump sum of 1 lakh. So using Article 142 of the Constitution, he said 1 lakh may be deposited. And to be fair to Justice Reddy, in the last line he says, we have used jurisdiction under Article 142 to do this. This would not be treated as precedent by any court. Dilip became the factor as if that was a case on breach of promise to marry, where as a part of the sentence you can give 1 lakh, 2 lakh. There was a particular judge in the Madras High Court, 5 lakhs, 15 lakhs, 20 lakhs, right? And that's something we didn't speak about. The sentencing fines, right? Guidelines in terms of fine. So he started using Dilip every time the citation was to Dilip. And this I happened to then, I studied this and I told Justice Reddy, I said, see what, here are all the cases where you're being cited. He said, what more could I have done? What more could I have done is not do that in that jurisdiction, in that particular case. Right? Of course, you want to do justice, you might want to do something, but then you have to think of some other procedural way of doing it. So unfortunately, courts are treating 142 as precedent. I think in terms of cherry picking, we need some sort of, not grid-based guidelines, but we need some sort of body to monitor the sentencing process. And I think the UK model is good because it's not grid-based. I'm also saying it's good because they have academics working there. who are studying the sentencing process and saying this is what's happening. You prepare yearly reports, and then you're holding the judiciary accountable, because in the internal politics between the judiciary and the academia, they got rid of Professor Ashworth because it's becoming too inconvenient in his criticism of the sentencing process, and sort of completely changed the manner in which the Guideline Commission worked, got back primacy to themselves. But that is one. Of course, Professor Thomas was doing, like I said, extensive work. So you write something which is completely off, you know that by the end of the month there will be a critique of it, and I think that is one example is the Delhi High Court judgment in the case of Achela, where Vrinda Grover went hammer and tongs against Justice Mukta Gupta in her a little bit, I think, overly harsh in her op-ed, but that really got judges saying, we didn't mean it that way. So if you didn't mean it that way, then how can we as the readers figure out if you write it in a judgment? So I think that is an accountability mechanism, and so on. Even if we don't get a body that really comes up with some sort of sentencing framework, back to us as academics to write more about it. And I think that's how the entire Mathura thing happened. That's how some of the Supreme Court judgments in the 90s were critiqued, because academics were writing and critiquing those judgments. How do you deal with compromise? I think that's a very difficult question. Pratiksha Bakshi deals with it extensively in her book. One chapter is completely devoted to the question of compromise. It does happen. So if compromise does happen, which is why is it happening, and that's a completely different factor. But if you're coming to a court saying that we have compromised, does the court really have the discretion to say, okay, I accept it? In a non-compoundable case, can you say I've taken compounding into consideration, a compromise into consideration and acquitting or reducing sentence? And one thing is, of course, intuition-based sentencing. And this was something that Australia, Justice Spiegelman in Australia, came up with a term called instinctive synthesis. Sentencing is done by instinctive synthesis. What is instinctive synthesis? Let it mean whatever I think the proper sentence should be. There was this entire tussle in the UK in the 1990s with courts saying, when sentencing commissions were being set up, that taking away any sort of sentencing discretion goes against independence of the judiciary. Critiquing academics were saying that you should take away sentencing discretion, and academics responded saying independence of the judiciary means that nobody puts pressure on you, nobody, you work within the framework of the law, does not mean you can do whatever you want, because you have to be accountable. And in the question of that mock case, simulation case you described, yes, we used to do it at the National Judicial Academy. We could not write a document about it, and because it's internal exercise. Conducted across around at least 2,000 judges across the country on a simulated case of date rape. We used to argue it so that at least we sort of emphasize on some points. 54% convictions, 46% acquittals, right, in 2,000 judges. And then from the judges who convicted, the 54%, we would say give sentence. And yeah, they would, like I said, one is 7 years without reason. Second is because those who had convicted, it was whole testimony, reduced the sentence, because they said, oh, we had sort of faced the situation saying a young girl goes out at night at 2 o'clock, is dating, relationships with this man, they have alcohol, etc. All those things, right? She should not have gone out at 2 o'clock. She should not have had alcohol. And those were the reasons which they gave for reduction of sentence. So we used to use that back in judicial education, saying that can you use these reasons? And of course, because it's all anonymous, yeah, you can say yes, you should not. But that's the thing. We just also worked in the National Judicial Academy. When we look at what programs we have to do on sentencing for judges. There is again hardly any work done. One. Second is when you call higher judiciary, there are very few people who actually understand the complexities with sentencing. Otherwise, it's no, it's you cannot have a straight jacket formula. All cases have to be decided as per the facts and circumstances of that case. So no, you cannot have any sort of, you cannot tell judges how they should be sentencing. It is a core function which we gain through experience. Right? And this is not only Indian judges, right? If you read English literature, US literature, you have judges articulating this until one day the discussion is completely taken away and nothing to do, which now happened in India, right? In one context. So I think it comes back to more work on sentencing.
Just to add what Mridal had said, I asked this person also that how you decide a quantum of sentence. He said they start from middle of it, like we say the punishment is up to 7 years. So we start from 3.5 years, and then we take balancing the act of mitigating and aggravating. We go up, come down, and that's how they decide the quantum of punishment.
Along this question, following up, in view of Somnath decision, 2014, Somnath decision, the Supreme Court has laid down that the balancing and of mitigating and
During the Sharma, that is Sharma case of Sadakan judgment, where they said that mitigating and aggravating instruction can be taken in other cases.
no,
Yes, sir, that is
Somnath case that says it is mandatory in all cases of sentencing.
not only
Not
limited to
only
the
death penalty cases, in all cases of sentencing, balancing between mitigation. Now, there are two questions following up on this kind of consistent. What are the implications of Somnath decision?
in the Sharma, sir.
In the Somnath case? And the second is in what manner it will change the face of sentencing in this country. Unless some guidelines are given, without any guidelines, even if balancing is done, and balancing is done purely subjective, with discretion. Some judge says balanced aggravating circumstances are more heavy and therefore I am giving 10 years. Sentence in which 10 years is the maximum. The mitigating circumstances are very light. Now, how do you arrive at this thinking? Unless there are guidelines, really saying that it is mandatory, even if it is taken up very seriously, what does it mean? But the lower court doesn't help the lower court at all. When it is balancing between the mitigating and aggravating circumstances. Your court will say we always do it. Now, what is the evidence? So, there should be an evidence. How do you operationalize this kind of mandatory guideline given by the court?
I think that's why I've been saying throughout. I think the UK model is not the UK model that Malimat committee recommended at that time, because that was a different model. The current UK model, which says that these are the steps, sentencing principles, yeah, regularly given, saying motor vehicle accident, these are the factors you need to keep in mind. If you don't use those factors, you need to say why, which gives you evidence, right? If you use the factors, also you need to justify why you're doing that, and that is what I think will lead to accountability. But again, unless we study it and come up with those factors,
I think to start with the DCI, only reason the sentencing is insisted upon, and we can get it. There are no reasons given for sentencing. The proof of conviction, कोर्ट में कर दिया, कोई रीजन नहीं। now आपको अच्छा लगा इसलिए कर दिया, ये क्या बात है? कोई रीजन बताइए क्यों आपने कर दिया? Why have you done this? Why have you done this? Now they don't give any reasons. They just do it because they think that they can do it.
So I'll go in the order that the questions came. One, in terms of the standard of proof in aggravation. One thing that is followed in the criminal justice system is, obviously as we know, is that if you have to prove an element of the crime, or you have to prove anything that increases liability. You have to, in criminal law, you have to do it beyond reasonable doubt. In the US, in jury trials, there was the entire question of what happens, like say in drug offences, if the change in quantity is actually leading to a higher sentence. Is that a sentencing factor, or is that a guilt adjudication factor? The US Supreme Court ruled that the moment, say, your sentence is going to increase, that factor has to be proved, sent back to the jury, and has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. And so I would, from taking that principle into consideration, agree with the Israeli model, saying that if I am going to argue that because of particular set of circumstances, this person's act is actually an aggravated act, and it's an aggravating factor, and this should ensure that this leads to a higher sentence. I, as the prosecution, should be able to bring that factor to the court and prove it beyond reasonable doubt. And of course, the question of what is beyond reasonable doubt is something that in evidence anyway.
The judicial system भी और इस केस में क्या होगा कि फैक्ट्स के बेसिस पे हम प्रेसिडेंट बनाने लगेंगे यहाँ पे सेंटेंसिंग का साथ like when in that case those were the facts and the court gave this much punishment, and now in this case these are the facts, so the punishment should be same or lesser accordingly. So we'll be getting towards subjectivity in sentencing.
So I think the one issue in sentencing that we need to sort of push down and make everyone understand is you cannot use it as precedent. You can use the principle as precedent, not the exact facts or the numbers as precedent. And that's the mistake we are making. We take Baldev Singh and take precedent, we give 3.5 years everywhere. It is a difficult, definitely a difficult.
We suppose that sentencing advocacy has become a fully fledged advocacy.
Yes, sir.
This is what was my sort of argument with Justice Ahmadi. I told him, sir, that unless you develop sentencing advocacy as a full-blown branch of advocacy, like bail advocacy, sentence advocacy अगर नहीं होगी, one day yes you are right, but I don't get time. I said, you have given me this. अब वो स्वामी अलाउद्दीन यहाँ you say 15 days break होना चाहिए. There should be an adjournment of 15 days. Thursdays, Saturday, Sunday this side, Saturday, Sunday that side. तो 15 दिन का आप ब्रेक कह रहे हैं, but then उस 15 दिन के बाद क्या आर्ग्यू करेगा वो आदमी? Unless you lay it down, judicially you lay it down about I'm not getting time to do it, he used to say this and now. Question is, we do not have fully blown sentencing advocacy in place. वो बड़ी भारी प्रॉब्लम है. हम ये कह रहे हैं beyond reasonable doubt,
Aspirational.
balance of probabilities. तो ये तो तर्क कम होगा जब एडवोकेसी होती है उस तरह की. एडवोकेसी होती ही नहीं है. अब सलमान खान का केस देख के वहाँ तो एडवोकेसी छोड़ो, पूरा जजमेंट नहीं लिखा गया है, सेंटेंस पास कर दिया. Now you could have done sentence before and then judgment. You could have conviction बाद में होगा कि sentence हमने पहले कर दिया. Now you are in such a hurry. The courts are taking it so casually. ये sentence बिना कोई judgment writing भी हो सकता है. तो फिर तुम कह रही हो कि sentence के टाइम में advocacy होनी चाहिए, beyond reasonable doubt, Israel model, ये तो बहुत
Aspirational, I think. But how many of us have courses on sentencing? I haven't yet. And I can tell you why I haven't yet. Because whenever I have wanted to offer even LLM or LLB, people have said it's too niche. I did teach. I have done a course in LLS thing, but the feedback I get from both the administration and students sometimes is too niche. Right? Who wants to do one entire semester on sentencing? Right? Because unless I want to be a sentence, so you might get.
If you want to develop sentencing
I will.
advocacy,
You have to do it.
got to do it.
Yeah, I am trying to do it next. So,
Please do it.
so I'm just waiting for my book to come out, which will in a couple of months, which will have all the material, so I can use that to teach. right? So certainly, but yeah, again, sentencing advocacy, even if you take regular students, who will say, why do that much when if I go to my internship, my lawyer I'm working with is not giving that much attention, it's only these academics who are giving that much attention to sentencing. So I think that's the need that we probably teach in the criminology course. I don't think we hardly get time in our IPC and CRPC courses going beyond 2 or 3 classes. So unless you've actually got people thinking about it, it will only be one judgment here and there from the Supreme Court. Justice Sinha kept writing and writing and writing, but the same impact is nobody understands those judgments because they don't have the sentencing jurisprudence or even the aptitude to be able to do that sort of argumentation. So influence of Hollywood and Bollywood, collateral factors. I think Sanjay Dutt argued that successfully, saying that you should not be sent to prison for a month or so that he completes all his projects. Because if he went into prison, then there would be thousands of people who would be unemployed immediately, half-done projects, and that would have an impact. And that brings me to how do you deal with collateral consequences? Are collateral consequences mitigating? Collateral consequences in relation to the offender, and we see this argument regularly. I lost my job because I committed a crime. I lost my job, so therefore please give a little less sentence because I lost my job. Courts have sometimes justifiably said, you lost your job because you committed that crime. If you commit misappropriation in your organization, you deserve to lose your job after an inquiry which is conducted. But on the other hand, when we say I lost my job or I am in prison, my family is suffering because of it, that is a valid reason. But is it a valid reason to deal in the sentencing process? No. Again, I go back to Professor Ashworth, who says, yes, these are factors that the state has to be doing. If the family of the accused is as much a victim as the victim of the crime, because the accused going into prison might leave them destitute, in which case we need to have a social security system. Now, lack of a social security system does not mean sympathy in sentencing, because again you're violating the rights of the victim there, because the victim is going to feel shortchanged. I think if you completely reduce sentence saying that his family is going to suffer because of it, that's a problem, and I'm sure this issue will come up again in Salman Khan when it goes to High Court, Supreme Court, if he sentence, of the impact that is going to have on the industry. In terms of theories of punishment, certainly, and two things like I said earlier, is a complete confusion of what theory of punishments are, and maybe judges, and we have seen that happening. I think one is Balyar, second in the Ansal movie case. This is Ravindra Bhatt's judgment in the Delhi High Court sort of uses theories of punishment, and you can see, even if you don't agree, because a lot of people didn't agree with Justice Ravindra Bhatt, but he had reasoning based on theories of punishment. So he is at least holding himself accountable, saying this is the reason why I have given this particular sentence. And I think that's where the legislature also has failed, because IPC doesn't say anything about theories of punishment. Macaulay does not say why he fixed 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, why those minimums, nothing of that. We only have the NDPS Act which says deterrence will be the theory of punishment to be followed. There at least you can argue, if you have lawyers to do that you have to give sentence based on deterrence. Otherwise, it's also a failure of legislation. That might be a good way, and that's what UK has done when they have said that, okay, motor vehicle accident, this is the theory, and then we construct the factors accordingly. I think I would definitely find it problematic that we started over-relying on science, where we say if it's science, it's objective, and that's highly problematic. But I think using probation officers is useful, especially until we develop a sentencing bar, because you would, if properly trained and properly guided with what they should be looking for, and we've seen that in other countries, where you send like a rough comparison Under Domestic Violence Act, we have the DIR, Violence Investigation Report, where the probation, the officers appointed under the Act have to go and sort of look at the family, the circumstances, and report back to the judge, because the judge will not be able to do that. So in the sentencing process, we don't want probation officers giving their opinions. We want them to go record some of these things. The person is saying that he or she has 2 acres of land, right? Does he or she have the 2 acres of land? Verify with the land documentation records. What has this? You can't really say this is the behavior of this person in prison, but in prison, what has the person done in terms of what are the tasks that he or she is doing? Is there a skill that he or she has developed in that period of time? What are they? Does the prison itself have any facilities? Because you might say reformation, you might be in a prison which has nothing, and then you say that we need
For
reform.
instance, we went to Kerala prison and we were doing the project. There, one person who has been given for homicide, and he was a person who was a manager in Dunlop, and he was writing bail applications on behalf of the prisoners. And there was a large number of prisoners. So I asked the Bihar prison officer, you wanted some new person? They said, no, he is a convict. He has been given and he has appealed to the High Court, and therefore he is helping the prisoners. I said, this fact would be very useful for the purpose of the probation officer to give in his report. This background fact would have been very useful if the matter is whether he deserves his strict or long-term sentence or he deserves short-term sentence. So all this you help people, you took them to the ambulance, you took them to the hospital, you help friends. So if there are factors like this which are listed out in probation officer report, that will be really useful for deciding about his sentence.
So I think it is more a question of, like a commission, sending out, not asking your opinion, but just to record facts, and of course there then have to be strictly at least a set of questions that person could comment on, and not go beyond and say, I don't think this person is very reformed or not, which does happen in Bharat Singh, because the group of psychiatrists examine and say, we cannot certify that this person is not beyond reform, but what if they had? Right. So again, is that the exact science? No, and so that is dangerous. But I think till at least we develop a system which might be useful, and I think that will be used in other countries. And again, it should not be binding on the judge of following exactly what the probation officer is saying. That might be a useful possibility.
I think the example of charity of Salman Khan is there.
Yeah. You see, I think there at least he has good lawyers. They will produce that he has actually done that much charity. But on the other hand, if he were to say that whatever that this is my family circumstances, again because it's Salman Khan, we probably know. But if I were to say these are my family circumstances, who is verifying whether that is true? The judge might not believe it. They say, oh, like saying, oh, you were a manager at Dunlop, and if you say I don't have money, you might say, oh, you were a manager at Dunlop, how do I believe that you didn't have money, right? So some of those factors also might be useful that probation officer can bring into that.
Thank you very much.